Morning, folks. Hope you're well. Well, after the past couple of Hydro Conquest videos, I figured I should chime in with a little chat, a few little comments, just to give a bit of a background in my watch collecting, as it is. I can see from some of the comments that I got on those videos that people are quite, is the word vociferous? People are very opinionated, and the room is effectively split on whether this Hydro Conquest release by Longines is an attempt to produce a fairly generic dive watch based on the Submariner, or if it's actually a real, authentic throwback to an earlier Longines, with the knowledge that Longines actually predates the Submariner in terms of being a dive watch, out-and-out dive watch, with things like the timing bezel, etc. I've, just to give a bit of background, I wouldn't have called myself a watch collector until about 2 years ago. So I am relatively new in the watch world, but I've always had a keen interest in watches. I've always enjoyed having a nice watch on my wrist. But until a couple of years ago, I never spent anything near a substantial amount of money on a watch. I'd have spent a few £100, pretty much. I'm trying to think when it kind of started. I think my first purchase over a few £100, which is sort of creeping up towards the £900, was the I think it was the King Turtle. So that was a £600 purchase, and that's going back about maybe 3-4 years ago. That was probably my most expensive purchase at that point. Since then, things have kind of moved on apace, and I've had a variety of watches. I would say in the last couple of years, it started with that watch, and since then I've had a lot of Seikos. One which I still very much enjoy wearing is the Seiko Presage. I actually had some of the cocktail hour Presages, which they're relatively, when they first came out, they retailed at around £400. My big bugbear with that was kind of Seiko missed the beat a little bit, because they put so much into the design of the watch, especially the dial. The dial's sensational. I first had the green one, and then the blue. I sold the green and then got the blue pre-owned. The watch is such a beautiful dress watch. I like the fact that it had a very nice large crown, very very easy to use crown. But the dial, it was all at the dial. The bracelet was meh, it was okay. It looked nice from a distance, but the quality of it was okay, but not great. But the real letdown on that watch is the crystal. So it's not a sapphire crystal. It's a Hardlex. Now that's their own proprietary crystal material, which is supposed to be resistant to scratches, but it's not. It's a scratch magnet, if you ask me. And to polish out those scratches is quite challenging, unless you give it into a watch repairer, I guess. So I don't have those cocktail hours anymore. I sold both of them, mainly for that reason, because I felt that the longer I kept it, the more the crystal would get scratched, and it would just bug the heck out of me. I'm not sort of crazy obsessive about it, but it was already attracting quite a few scratches. But I moved on from that to the Sensation. So the Presage Classic Sensation, this is like a step up. They were retailing at 900. They still retail at 900. It went on sale at one point on Goldsmith's website. I bought the grey one. They call it green, but it's grey really. Beautiful watch. I've done videos on those before. I think I've got a video on the channel. I can't remember. I'd have to look back. But the features on that really struck a chord with me. The sapphire crystal the 6-hour movement. So I'm not massively into every second of time that it keeps, how accurate it keeps. The 6-hour is not going to be, it's not a great movement, but it's a fairly solid movement. But it gives you this the 3-day power reserve, and for me that's a big upgrade on the 4-hour movement. Um, I like the features of the handset on the Sensation. The handset, it's got this vintage vibe. So you have the minute hand, it just curves just at the end because the dial curves down. So the handset follows that curve, the minute hand and the second hand. And the bracelet as well is very nice. It curves very nicely. It drapes very nicely on the wrist. It's a comfortable watch to wear. Size-wise, I think it's 40.5 mil. So just for me, it's just about right. 13.9 is probably a sweet spot for me, but the Seikos, they're well known for really fitting well on your wrist. I have a 42 mil dive watch, Seiko, the SPB 509J1, which is a limited edition dive. It's 42 mil. It's a big chunky watch, but it just feels comfortable on the wrist. Whereas in contrast, my Tudor Chrono 41, also it's a 41 mil, so technically smaller than that, but it wears so much heavier and bigger. Than they weigh similar, they have similar weight, but the Seiko almost disappears on your wrist compared to the Chrono, which you always know that you're wearing. I do need to get that to fit better on my wrist because I'm kind of in between sizes. So I don't know. I could change the bracelet for the Jubilee. I think that will solve the problem with the T-Fit clasp. But they're not cheap to get an original OEM Tudor. They're £840. You can buy aftermarket, which I am considering. I'm kind of looking into different aftermarket versions, which are, reasonable quality. It's something I might do, but I haven't really made a final decision whether I'm going to hold on to the Chrono 41. So the Chrono 41 is currently my most expensive watch. I have a 1926 Luna, which I'm currently wearing. And what else do I have that's worth mentioning? I've got a King Seiko. I've had aspirations for a Grand Seiko, and I may well end up with one at some day. But the King Seiko kind of scratches that itch for now. It's got wonderful finishing. The one I have is the Denim Indigo, which is the 38.3, I think it is. It's around 38 mil, and that's just about okay on me. It's starting to get towards the smaller side, but I actually really love wearing that watch. The only issue that I have with those two, the bracelet, the clasp is the butterfly clasp, and the King Seiko's butterfly clasp is the same clasp that's used on the Sensation. They both have the same problem, that they pop open too easily. So if you sort of move your wrist around and you happen to hit the button, the slightest touch pops it. I actually wrote into Seiko. I sent both bracelets back to Seiko, and they changed the clasps on both of them. But they did exactly the same thing when they came back, and I've just not bothered getting back in touch with them. But when I first sent those in, I did write to them, and I explained to them the problem with it. Not that they need me to tell them what's wrong with their watch, but I'm sure I'm not the only person to have that issue. But the little button, it operates a little tooth which grips an aperture in the butterfly clasp. And the amount that it holds on is so tiny, so of course when you slightly touch the button, it's going to pop. All they need to do is extend that tooth and it'll be fine. But that really just needs a very slight redesign, and it will solve the problem permanently. It would be an easy fix. It just means them retooling on that piece, which I suppose they're not going to do. I also have another Presage Classic. I have the Sriracha, which is a limited edition version of it, which is very nice. It comes on a leather strap with a deploying clasp. And it also has a very nice coin edge around the bezel area. It's a lovely watch. It's got a beautiful dial as well, and a lovely textured dial. It's a nice dress watch. I have a Seiko Alpinist Mystic Forest, which is a boutique edition. Love that watch. That's a more sort of, again, sort of the cheaper end of the scale. I call it cheaper. It's still a lot of money. It's about £700, 740, something like that retail, but only available from boutiques. It's not a limited edition. You can get them as long as they produce them. You know, the boutique editions, they produce only so much. So effectively, at some point, it will become a limited edition, but not an intentional limited edition. Um, so that just gives you an idea of some of the watches that I have. So whilst I don't have major experience over a long period of time, I've certainly acquired a nice variety. And I've tried to essentially cover a dress watch, a tool watch, chronograph, dive watch, and sort of a couple of daily drivers in between. And so when I saw the Hydroconquest, when I first saw them being released, to me, they felt a little bit uninspiring. The previous Hydroconquest was recognizable by the large, oversized numerals to me, the large crown guards, and it kind of lost that in this latest iteration. So to me, it looked a little bit generic. And when I said in my video the other day that my son said to me that it looks like a Pagani, what I meant by that was that all those things which I've just mentioned, which makes it a little bit generic looking, he summed it up in a way. It's not that I like the watch, and because my son said it looks like Pagani, I suddenly didn't like the watch. The point I made was, if you watch the video back, because a couple of people commented that, you know, don't you have a mind of your own? And as soon as your son said it looks like a Pagani, you went off the watch. That's not the case. If you watch the video back, you'll see that I was trying to explain what I felt was not quite right for me. You know, it's all personal. We all, there's no absolutes here. We all have our own tastes, and it's horses for courses. What I might like, somebody else won't like, and what somebody else likes, I might not like. It doesn't mean that I'm any more or less of a watch collector. It doesn't mean that you're any more or less of a watch collector. There's room for everybody. And what I like the most about these kind of things is the discussion. You know, it doesn't need to become offensive. You know, people don't need to say, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." We all have different levels of knowledge, and that's all part of the fun. You know, you don't have to talk down to people because you might think that you know more about the next person about the subject. It's a childish attitude. So, as far as the Langes is concerned, maybe I didn't make this point clearly enough. That's possible, but I actually think it's a very, very nice watch. For me, in my collection, in my variety of watches, there wasn't a place for it in that particular model. So that variation that I had was the green, and to me it did. I think he summed it up well. To me, it looked like a Pagani type of idea. In other words, what I mean by that is that it's got a very generic look about it. Not to say that the quality is like Pagani, and I'm not here to diss on Pagani either. Pagani has a place. You know, I bought my son when he was, I think, 13 years old. I bought him a Pagani version of the Explorer. It's literally identical. Obviously, it's not the same quality, but he loves the watch, and so it has its place. If you've got a kid that's getting an interest, what a great way to give him a way in by having a watch which he feels is very similar to a Rolex. I think Pagani has a place. The San Martins of this world. You look at San Martin, started off as an homage brand, but they're actually releasing a lot of unique designs of their own now. And you know, I think before long they will become a fairly respected, maybe lower to mid-tier watch brand. You know, they'll perhaps stop doing the homages. Who knows? It's a AliExpress brand, but I think they're doing some really nice designs, unique designs, and their quality is reasonable. Solid movements, usually NH35s, pretty solid workhorse movements. It's not going to set the world alight, but it's just a good movement. You know, it's a reliable movement ultimately serviceable, and as a starter watch, like I say, those brands have their place as well. So that's what I meant when I said about the Pagani that looks like a Pagani, simply because it's fairly generic. It feels, yeah, I'm not saying that was the intention, but it feels like an homage to the Submariner. But I totally accept that it may well be that it's more true to its original origins, from a previous model. It's the latest. It's not the latest fashion. It's been going for a while. This idea of reintroducing watches from the catalogs. Seiko's been doing it for a long time. All these reinterpretations and the reintroductions and the 62 mass. They're all playing out, taking advantage of it. All the brands are doing that because they want to make sales. And as soon as you put some kind of emotional connection to something, look at the Speedmaster from Amiga, the connection with the moon landing. So people go for that. They want that connection. Let's be honest, when we buy a watch, a lot of the time, especially if we have enough watches and you kind of try to justify in your own mind, well, I've got to have that watch, but you've got a watch. You can tell the time. What do you need another one for? But that's what collecting's about, regardless of what you collect. If you collect pens or you collect postage stamps, it makes no difference. If you already have a pen, that's what collecting is about. It's not about the actual intrinsic purpose of the item. It's about you enjoying having a collection, having a variety, whatever your mode of collecting is. It might be every pen made by a certain brand. It might be one of each brand. Everybody has their own way of collecting. For me, at the moment, it's about having a good spread of types of watch. I'm not necessarily dedicated to one particular brand. I would say that I'm quite a strong Seiko fan, but I'm certainly moving beyond that at the moment with the Tudors, and now the Longines. So the Longines is a great watch. I'm not saying it's not a good watch. The green Longines that I had for a matter of 12 hours or 24 hours, I don't know if it was the fact that it was the green bezel and green dial. It just looked. It didn't work for me. It didn't tickle my fancy. It didn't set my world on fire. And nowadays, with distance selling rules, if you buy something online, as long as you don't do anything to the watch, you can send it back. So for me, when I do that, I buy a watch online. If it doesn't set my world on fire, I'm going to send it back. So I was looking at the other variations of the watch, and I came across the electric blue bezel with the dark. I'm not sure if it's dark blue or black. That's not important. I guess I'll see when it arrives. I came across a pre-owned one, but in pretty much unused condition on eBay. But I was waiting on my refund for the green one, and I wasn't going to spend it again, the outlay, before I got the refund. So I got in touch with the guy on eBay, and I said, is there any way I can give you a deposit? So he said he's already, I made an offer. He had it on there for $18.50. And bear in mind, this is the one with the Milanese, the mesh bracelet, which is a little bit more money. So I made him an offer, and he said actually he's already got somebody willing to pay slightly more, but if you get in first, you can have it. So I said, well, I'm waiting on a refund on the green one that I've just returned. Is there any way I can do a deposit? So he said, actually, I've got a website. I can relist it on the website at 20%. You can pay the 20% and then pay me the balance when you get your refund, which I thought was very nice. He actually had the thing on his website priced cheaper because obviously it doesn't have the eBay fees to pay. So it was a win-win. I actually got it at a crazy price. So I paid him a deposit, and the refund should hit in the next day or two, and I'll get the electric blue bezel one with the dark dial with the Milanese bracelet. I'm not sure that the mesh bracelet will work for me. I have no idea. So we'll have to wait and see. The good thing about it is because it's pre-owned, it's already been fitted to the previous owner. It may well be something that I could put on my wrist without having to adjust. and seeing if the mesh bracelet is comfortable. But because it's pre-owned, there may be more room for me to really experiment with the watch and see if it suits me. I do also like the slate grey bezel one that is out there. They're not as common. I mean, none of them are common now. They're still in very high demand. But I kind of like the look of that one as well. But I'll see what the blue one is like. The blue one does look very bright, and I'm not sure over time whether that will end up being too bright. So I have to kind of judge that. So I just wanted to redress that really and to explain that I wasn't trying to diss on the watch itself. Just that particular one, to me, just didn't strike the right balance. So if I were to have the choice, and obviously we all have our own preferences, but if I was designing this new iteration, I would have kept the numerals, but just made them smaller. So still a little bit bigger than you'd expect, but not quite as big as they were before. I think they were a little bit too obtrusive in the previous iteration. Obviously, have the ceramic bezel. That's a big upgrade as far as I'm concerned. Generally speaking, nowadays, if I'm buying a dive watch, it's going to have ceramic. I'm not going to get aluminium. It's just going to scratch too easily. The upgraded movement, but as I say, I'm not a huge expert on movements, but listening to all the various other videos out there, that it's supposedly a very good movement with anti-magnetic features, and it's something which would, were they to put it through METAS certification, would probably gain that certification, but obviously keeping price down without doing that. So the price point is where it's at, and that's why it's so popular. A lot of people saying that you're getting quality of watches at least one tier above, so approaching Tudor. I'm not going to really bring tag into it because tag, I've had lots of tags in the past. Previously when I wouldn't have called myself a collector, I still enjoyed a nice watch. Actually, I'm wrong. I said beforehand that I'd only spent a few £100 back in the day. So I'm talking about 20 years ago. I'd forgotten. I have had a number of tags. I've had probably half a dozen aqua races over the years. But at that stage, as I said before, I wouldn't have called myself a collector. I just like to have a nice watch. I remember my first ever tag racer, my first ever tag aqua racer, I bought from, it was in a mall near where I live, Ernest Jones, that's the company, Ernest Jones, and they always had a small display cabinet of pre-owned watches before pre-owned was a thing. And I saw this, it was a quartz aqua racer, regular basic aqua racer. It was, I don't know, it was a small size. It was probably something like a 38 mil, which in those days was probably considered a good size, quite large. It's got to have been 20 years ago, something like that. And I paid out for it. I couldn't afford to pay for it. I paid them a deposit, and it took me a while to pay it, but eventually I got it, and I absolutely loved that watch. I had that watch for a few years, served me very, very well. And since then I've had a number of aqua races. But I've kind of gone off tags. They're I don't know, just it doesn't seem to, the quality of them just don't quite ring true for me when I compare it, say, to a Tudor. If I was going to pick, I would always pick a Tudor over a tag. But tags nowadays are a similar price, and I think Tudors are better. This is my personal opinion. There might be people out there who disagree. That's fine, but I think Tudors are better. So essentially, I just wanted to just give a little bit of my background, and also to explain a little bit what I meant about the Pagani comment. It was essentially to say that it just looked generic. So by taking out those numerals, it's certainly, for people who wouldn't necessarily know the history of Longines, about the early dive watches that they had made, myself included, meant that it looks generic, which it does. You can't argue that point. It does look generic. A quirk is the two circular indices. I can't quite get my head around that. You've got the triangular 12 o'clock, which is fairly common, and then battens for the other indices, but at 6 and what is it, 6 and 8 position. You've got two circular, just two out of 12 possible positions. Well, 11, I guess, if you discount the 3 o'clock date. Um, Two of them around. What's the sense in that? That's really odd. But the more I think about it, I think it's quite quirky, and I think that actually might become an identifier for that watch. So whilst you don't have the large numerals, maybe that will be what makes it recognizable as a Longines. Maybe. I think it's interesting. It's certainly a point of discussion. Um, I do like that they've retained the crown design. I'm not sure if it's a little bit smaller than it was previously, but it's still a recognizable Hydroconquest crown. And the reason why why I was looking for the mesh bracelet is because one of the things which I didn't like about the 39mm with the bracelet, with the H bracelet, when you combine the bracelet together with the lugs, it takes on a very, very hefty look. And I think that was one of the main things which put me off the watch. Not so much the green. The green, I think, over time might have become a little bit, you know, it, a watch which doesn't fit every occasion. And I was looking for, I wouldn't say a daily driver because I've got a variety of watches, so I wouldn't necessarily wear it daily, but that kind of dive watch. And the green obviously sets it apart. It's not really for me anyway. Some people it might be, but for me, it wouldn't have been a classic daily driving watch. But one of the things which put me off was that very robust, aggressive look. Almost makes the watch look square. The bracelet together with the lugs are so. It's actually quite prominent on this watch too, but it's longer on the Longines, so it almost makes it look like a rectangle, and that was too much for me. It just looked a little bit too heavy for me. Then I looked at the Milanese, the mesh. Now, with the mesh, because it's the mesh, it's got a straight bar, which houses the spring bar. And because it's straight, so you have gaps between the lug and the end link, the straight end link. And that softens the look hugely to me. Initially, when I first saw the mesh bracelet model, I thought, I don't like that gap. Why couldn't they do a fitted end link, which fits right into the lugs? And I'm now thinking actually that that's a benefit. I have, like I mentioned, the Seiko the King Seiko, and that has a straight end link. Doesn't fit. And when I first bought it, I wasn't sure if it was something I liked. But the reality is that it's to evoke a bit of a vintage look to the watch. The King Seiko is a reiteration of an old King Seiko. It's actually really faithful to the original design. It's very angular, lots of angles, brushed and polished angles. And I've come to love that watch, I really have. And that straight end link compared to the sculpted one or fitted one, whatever you want to call it, is actually part of its charm. And I'm hoping, I don't know yet until I have it in my hands, I'm hoping that the mesh bracelet on the Longines is going to have the same effect, that it's going to soften that look. It does give it a bit more of a vintage look, which I kind of like. If you look at the Submariner, compared to the previous Submariner, I had the previous Submariner for about 2 hours, about a month ago. My son, who's into watches as well, my oldest son, he's in his 30s, he has a Rolex himself, he has a back bell. And when I was in the market for a new watch, one of his mates had this mint condition previous version. I forget the numbers. It's got loads of ones and sixes in it. 166 something 0. You experts there will know which one it is. But essentially, it's a slightly less hefty design than the current Submariner iteration. So if you have a look at the lugs on that version, it's more sculpted. It's more svelte. The lugs are thinner. When they come to a point, they're thinner. The the current version of the Submariner has a much wider, the ends of the lugs is wider. So again, you have this really wide, almost square look. on the current version of the Submariner. And were I to have the choice, if I was going to be Rolex, if I was going to slightly update the Submariner, that's what I would do. I would keep all the modern updates that they've put, ceramic bezel and the movement updates and whatever else they've done to update the Submariner, the solid bracelet and the solid clasp, all of that. But I would just trim the lugs. That's me. Some people like that hefty look, that sort of very male, more aggressive kind of look to it, and that's fine. Just my personal taste would be to keep all of the updates except that. Just bring those lugs in a little bit, and I think it would make the Submariner a better watch. That, again, that's just me personally. So I'm hoping that the mesh bracelet on the Longines will do that for me too. It'll just make it a little bit more, it'll soften the look, which is what I'm looking for. So that's just a little bit of background as far as my watch collection is concerned, and a little bit of an explanation into my previous video. I did also, I should note, that my order of uploading was done in error. So initially, the second video was titled Unboxing, which it wasn't. What had happened is I did the unboxing video, and within a few hours I knew that I wasn't keeping it, and so I did another video giving the reasons why I wasn't keeping it. When I was uploading them, the thumbnails were almost identical, and I picked the wrong one. So I uploaded the reasons why I wasn't keeping it, but it was titled Unboxing. So I had them in the wrong order, essentially. So that's why that might have been a bit puzzling for people when they were expecting to see an unboxing, rather they were seeing a video of me dissing the watch. So just to repeat, I wasn't dissing the design overall, just that particular iteration. We'll see. I mean, if it may well be that by the time I get the blue one, that I decide that I don't like it overall. We'll see. But we will see. It is very well made. I'm not saying it's a bad watch. Anyway, I think I'm labouring the points now. I wish you all well. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you on the next one.